Hello everyone, welcome to a new video on the channel. It's great to be doing this again. Today, as you can tell with the title video, I'm going to be doing a smaller Bible study. It's only 10 verses, but those verses are quite powerful. First of all, it'll be a nice, simple, more simpler video to get some stuff out that I believe God was kind of calling me to say. I thought it would be more simple one than I get my study Bible that I just got for Christmas, and I'm instantly just realize how much levels there are to these 10 verses, which is kind of just the story of the entire Bible, but I always forget that I need reminding. So we'll be looking at Luke chapter 19, verses 1 to 10, which is the story of Zacharias when Jesus brings salvation to Zacharias' home. I'll read it first and we'll talk about it. So Luke chapter 19, verses 1 to 10. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacharias. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but he was short, so he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed up a sycamore fig tree to see him. Since Jesus was coming that way, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said, Zacharias, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zacharias stood up and said to the Lord, Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. So now that I've read it, I've basically structured this into different sections where we talk about different things. So the first one is the background and all the context and why the events took place the way they did, which covers all of the 10 verses just for the background. Then I'll talk more about the conviction of the sin of Zacharias in verses 7 to 8, and verses 9 to 10. I will talk about the salvation being saved through Jesus, and then I'll end with my closing thoughts. So let's start with the background, the context. So, to finance their world empire, the Romans levied heavy taxes on all nations under their control. The Jews opposed these taxes because the taxes support a secular government and its pagan gods, but they were still forced to pay. If I look anyway at this size, because my notes are there on the laptop. Tax collectors were amongst the most unpopular people in Israel. Jews by birth, they chose to work for Rome and they were considered traitors. And everybody knew that they were making themselves rich by charging more money than needed because they were allowed to keep the extra money that they charged. So it's not a surprise, really, that everyone muttered and talked behind Jesus' back when he came home to stay at the house of a tax collector. Would have surprised. This would have surprised them. Would have been disgusted and everything. But Jesus still loved him throughout all the mistakes he made. He loved him, and he wanted to show him his love, despite the fact that he cheated people of their money, and despite the fact he was someone who turned away from his fellow Jews, and more importantly, God by the things he wants to show that he still loves him and cares for him. And that's kind of the background of why everything kind of takes place the way it is. That's kind of like why the people believe that he was inferior for being this for Zacharias was terrible person for being this tax collector, and why Jesus was still opening up into the house for the real lessons that we were going to get into. So that's like the background in terms of why everything took place the way it did. So verses 7 to 8, the conviction of sin. So it said once again 7 to 8, all the people began to marvel, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zacharias stood up and said to the Lord, Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I cheated anybody out of anything, I'll pay back 4 times the amount. So we can assume by the first things first, we can assume by the way the crowd treated him that he was of a very crooked tax collector, a very evil tax collector who really took advantage of the system that have done some horrible things to get money and to live this happy life. However, after he met Jesus, and we'll get back to that after he met key part, after he met Jesus, he realized his life needed straightening out, and basically he was convicted of the sin. Jesus revealed to him all the horrible things he'd done and how he needed to sort it out and right those wrongs and not live by those things anymore. So he decided to change, to demonstrate this change outward by obviously giving his half of his possessions to the poor and giving 4 times the amount he cheated them out of money, if that's what they've done. And I think this part is an example of how faith in Jesus is not like a head or heart alone. You need to show through your actions. Which is such a big part about seeing God's kingdom come. People will see through you the good things God is doing. So you need to kind of show like the right and actions of the things you do. And one thing I found interesting that in this situation, Jesus convicted of his sins, and Zacharias was transformed immediately. He knew what he needed to change, and he went and changed it. That will happen to people. God will convict people of their sins, and over time, will convict you of sins. But if you follow him and you decide to follow him, he will transform you and he will remove those things that are holding you back, the sins. He will so literally work so those things holding you back are not there anymore. These things that you need to get rid of, he will work within you to get rid of them. And sometimes it will you transform and get rid of it immediately. Sometimes that's just how it works. And sometimes though, it will take longer. It'll take longer. You will realize these things, but it'll take longer for that to be transformed and those things to end, because we're all sinful human beings that never meet the match, and we're always going to have things that are holding us back that we have to keep working towards. Even as when we come to faith, there will still be things holding us back. I know for myself that there are things holding me back because we're human beings, and I have to pray that one day this thing goes away. And it takes time sometimes. Sometimes it's immediate. Sometimes it takes time, but that isn't because God has forgotten about you. He's just doing this in his own time. To make sense of this, I've picked up the verse from Philippians chapter 1, verse 6. Be confident of this, that he who began a good work will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus Christ. Basically saying God will not stop working within you for the good plans he has, and he won't give up on you no matter how many times you fall down, how much time this sin convicts you, but you can't seem to get rid of this habit. God will not stop working with you. He will not give up on you, and he will keep doing that until that time you're with Jesus, until the day that Jesus Christ comes back to that. Like, that is what it's basically saying in that verse. So that is really good reassurance, because even when we become Christians, there will be sinful things that are holding us back that we have to keep working towards, praying towards, trying to find out how we can get rid of them. This includes myself. But it's good to know that God doesn't give up on you no matter how many times you fall short of his glory. That should give us lots of pleasure. So finally, verses 9 through 10, which is all about being saved through Jesus. So I'll reread it again. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man is too a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. It's funny because the thing I want to say is that when Jesus said that Zacharias was a son of Abraham, and yet was lost, that he was lost, that has been found, and is a son of Abraham, this would have annoyed the people watching, because this has started quite an audience was seeing. He was saying there's two people. This would have annoyed them to like the bone, that he would dare say something like this. for at least two reasons why this would have angered the people. One, they would not have liked to acknowledge that this unpopular tax collector that was doing awful thing was a Jew and a fellow son of Abraham. For those who don't know, the Jews were God's chosen people through the works of Abraham. So that's why they say son of Abraham. The people refused to acknowledge that the sinful tax collector was one of their own, was a Jew and a son of Abraham that they had to treat with respect as one of their fellow believers in God. That annoyed them. That this wasn't punishing them, but he was going into their house and saying that he is a son of David and a fellow Jew. This would have really annoyed them. And number two, they would not like to admit that the sons of Adam were lost. They would not have liked to admit that the sons of Adam were lost and needed finding and needed saving. They would not like to believe that, because once again, they were God's chosen people. They're like, but we are God's chosen people. We don't need saving. We are God's chosen people to do these incredible things for him. And the only reason they are God's chosen people, once again, is because of the actions of Abraham, which is what I think the main message is that these people fail to understand that a person is not saved because of their heritage or because of a good heritage or condemned by a bad one. Saving faith, the faith in God and being saved and being found is not determined by your genealogy. That is something that these people fail to see, because they thought they were saved, they were found through the actions of Abraham, but that doesn't mean anything to you. It doesn't matter where you've come from. That doesn't determine your faith or if you're saved or not. So that is why it's not determined by whether you've got a good heritage or if you come from bad heritage. Like, it's not determined that way. It's determined by Jesus, who, as we all know, later on in his life would die on the cross for the sins of to save all the world from its sin and to save all the lost, meaning us, because we're all lost. We're all fall short of God's glory. We're all lost and we all need Jesus. So this means that regardless of their backgrounds or the previous ways of life, that through faith in Jesus, the lost can be found, forgiven, and made new. That is the heart of the Christian message. And I find it amazing that this short bit before Jesus has died yet is pointing us towards that moment where he dies. Like, it points us towards that sacrifice, that everything Jesus did was intentional, and that this moment was help point us to Jesus and what he would do on the cross for the sins of all of us and to save us, regardless of our backgrounds and our previous ways of life. Through Jesus, that doesn't matter. And I love how this part is direct, is supposed to point us to that in just these short 10 verses, which is such an incredible thing to experience. So, my closing thoughts. Jesus loves Zacharias no matter what anyone else thought about him. He loved him and he loves you. Zacharias, another thing to point out is that Zacharias didn't sort out his life in order to meet with Jesus. He came to Jesus as he was and Jesus sorted it out, which is just I think a lie in it we get when like some people project is that before you become a Christian, there's this self-conscious thing saying before you become a Christian, you've basically got to sort your life out on the things that are holding you back. You need to get rid of that before you can be accepted by God. And that is just not true. That is not how it works. You don't sort it out yourself. Let Jesus work within you to change those things, and through Jesus and your relationship with him, he will sort those things out. It's not up to you. You can't do this alone. We were never meant to carry these burdens that our world carries. And we weren't meant to carry this and deal with this ourselves before we come to Jesus. We're supposed to come to Jesus first, because humans were never made to carry these burdens. I think a Bible verse that came up that uh, supports this perfectly is from Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. And Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Don't try and get rid of your burdens before coming to Jesus. Come to Jesus, and he release you of these heavy burdens that are dragging you down and give you the freedom as a believer of Christ. You can't do it, but Jesus can. And there is hope in that belief and that faith. So, wow. Yeah, this was something that the more I studied, the more amazing truths were in it, because it's basically, from what I saw in this, 10 verses about how we should come to Christ. Although Jesus hadn't died yet, this was put in there, and he did this to point us to that, of how we should come to Christ, because we can't do it, because we're not capable of doing it, but Jesus can, and there's joy in that we don't have to deal with this alone. That's all I really have to say. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you did, why not check out a few more videos? I hope you'll very much enjoy this. See you on the next one.